It's episode 50 of the FinTech Mosh Pit, and we have Cheryl Richards, incoming president of Johnson & Wales University, to discuss higher education in the time of COVID. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Once again, the FinTech Mosh Pit is back. 50 episodes down, the half-century mark. Hard to believe. I can't even fathom it. And we have a real special treat for you today. She is the incoming president of Johnson & Wales University. Cheryl Richards is here to discuss higher education in the time of COVID. First of all, President-elect Cheryl Richards, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tarek. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have my new mascot here behind me, the Wildcats.
I see that right there. And that's I thought that was like you're in your front yard and you just have your own. Each president-elect just gets their own statue like that, right?
They do. You know, they actually have to pre-order this, and so it was a pretty quick delivery given the COVID, the backlog in supply chain. But I'm excited to have it.
Of course. So listen, let's get right to it, because I think there's a lot of people very interested to see a very recognizable face in town, but a new face in relation to a new role. I'm going to put an asterisk next to everything we're about to talk to, that your official start date is June 15th. So we're talking to you as you are literally preparing for that first exciting day. You're not even inside formally the walls yet. So I think we'll take everything with a grain of salt and all these questions. But I think the biggest thing is for us to understand the frame of mind you're entering, the things that are going through your heads at a very important part of the kind of ongoing education system of Charlotte, of this region, and particularly during a challenging time where the connection to us in technology and fintech, but also the connection to university and education, and then our economy as a whole couldn't be more challenging and stark, but also couldn't be more important. So with that premise, let me just start with a real basic question. And I just, again, you're finding things out as you're learning and picking up on them. What have you found out or seen, or maybe even been parts of in some cases, that Johnson & Wales has been doing to lean into the community during this crisis right now? And how have they been involved? We really like to start there for a chance for you to showcase any of those things so the community understands that really everyone is leaning in as best as they can.
Yeah, well, thank you for starting with that question, because I think it puts an emphasis on why higher education institutions are important to Charlotte in our region. We are very much a community that is about relationships and about giving back and about going to your fellow citizens and saying, what can I do for you? And then later figuring out how does that reciprocate, come back at a later date. And I think, no more prevalent than a pandemic for institutions and students to rally together and say, how can we make an impact in our community? And then layer on top of that, an institution like Johnson & Wales, which is so known for culinary and hospitality programs, which has been some of the hardest hit industry, not only in Charlotte, but around the country. I was reading an article recently that said 36% of the layoffs came out of the restaurant industry. And the business is down, and lots of articles around what's the new normal for that industry. But the faculty and the staff and the students at Johnson & Wales over the last 2 months have already started to lean into that. And so you see things. There are two chefs, Chef Megan Lambert and Chef Q, Chef Quintina Stewart, who got together with a number of the student teaching assistants, and they put together 700 boxed and bagged lunches in partnership with the Loyalist Market to go feed school-age children who were counting on their meals coming from the school system. It included preparing 50 pans of entrees and meals. And then they prepared dinners for children of hospital workers in a partnership with the YMCA. And then, kind of in this theme of partnerships, They took donations from Cisco Foods and partnered with the Piedmont Culinary Guild and others from CPCC to assemble 500 bags of groceries for individuals. So you can really see kind of the community groundswell around how do we mobilize the resources that we have. And that doesn't even count the supplies that Johnson & Wales had in the culinary storeroom that were donated to Second Harvest Food Bank and to the Community Culinary School, and providing a lot of fruits and vegetables that otherwise would have perished. And so, kind of leaning into the community and figuring out ways that we could give back. And those are the obvious things. You hear about people coming together to put together kind of lines for soup kitchens and things. But then I think the other great opportunity that Johnson & Wales leaned into was as a part of our hospitality management program in addition. And so we had two of our professors, Dr. Schafskal in hospitality management, who has been on multiple news outlets talking about the impact to the restaurant industry and some of the things we might see changing as we kind of get back to the new normal. And Dr. Alistair Williams in hospitality management, who actually sat down with Lost World Beer and talked about how do you create an experience around craft beer when people know it's about the sights and the sense and the experience and the socialness of that in these small microbreweries. How do you maintain that, post pandemic? And all of that, all the way to home kitchen shows. How do you take the ingredients out of your kitchen and how do you mix it up so that you have a different meal every night? So I think that's a great example of ways that the Wildcat community from Johnson & Wales has really leaned into this pandemic.
Let's go back and just spend the rest of the show talking about the brewery stuff, if you don't mind. That's near and dear to my heart. That's what we're talking about. Now, in all seriousness, just to touch on that, that's so critical. Like people don't I think what a lot of people don't realize is that, they know a number, maybe if they're paying attention, 38 breweries, right? And cideries and all kinds of things like that. That's what makes Charlotte what it is. The 10,000 plus small businesses that have 25 employees or less, the 38 plus breweries, all of those things. That when they talk about our culture, about our spirit, about what the city is, literally, I can't find a bigger ingredient than that. And it's scary, scary times when you think those are particularly areas that may not come back the way that they were before. Charlotte we may come out of this, out of our, houses huddled up for months, and we may not recognize elements of the city. So I just want to applaud that piece of the work, because it's so, so important in the recovery. And our recovery plan as a city is not going to be one big plan. It's going to be 50, 75, 100 little efforts and plans for the things that people care about to save. So I think that's spot on.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, particularly when you think about some of these industries, that the margins are so small in small businesses that they have to become very creative and very innovative about how they're going to rethink their own operations. And, as a community, I think we have an obligation to all of those small businesses and restaurants and microbreweries and places to also take a look at the public policy aspect of that, because they're sitting, waiting now to hear what are the requirements going to allow me to do so that I can put as many people in an environment and create an experience for them, but also meet my margins on a lower volume, right? So there's this element that I think we have to go hand in hand. The educational institutions that are preparing people to go into these jobs and start new businesses, the public policy advocates, the broader business community that has the heft and the capital to invest in this. It's got to be a partnership all the way around.
So, all right. I'm going to phrase this question from me, Tark, someone who's lived and loved Charlotte for the better part of 2 decades, right? And I'm going to frame it with my perspective, and I want you to correct me and tell me, well, that maybe isn't the holistic one, or it is, or whatever, but really more of the backdrop, though, for the question I'm going to ask. I think on one side of the coin, if you're from Charlotte or you've been here for over a decade or more, it's undeniable the impact that Johnson & Wales has had on this community. Undeniable. And I think most people that look at it think, in 2003, when I moved here, the argument was, man, there's nowhere any good to eat in town. And now it's just like this whole world, right? This booming everywhere you go, good food on Montfort, X, Y, Z. And so much of it is cited back. And I think people realize to the fact that we have this amazing asset in our backyard. On the other side of that coin, I might argue, nobody really knows what Johnson and Wales is that I talk to. I mean, and I'm over characterizing here. Clearly people do, but I think there's some that if you look at that general mass of charlatans who've been around for a while, they're like, yeah, that's the reason we all get to eat great food. And there's this element of like, maybe not understanding all the other things they do. I mean, I've learned in the last year or two, just because I'm around folks that are from there and they force me to know. So I guess I'm just going to ask on both sides of that coin, what interested you about this job and made you take it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I moved to Charlotte in 2004, which was the same year that Johnson & Wales opened in our community. They had made the decision, I think in about 2002, to relook at their operations in Charleston and bring them to Charlotte. And I think that's the excitement you're talking about around the economic impact and the energy. And it was palpable, for so many years, people were so excited about having another institution of higher education in the region, particularly one that specialized in culinary and hospitality. And, I remember seeing a lot of the graduates and the students walking around in their chef's hats and their collars, walking up and down Trade Street in there. And I think Johnson & Wales had this massive presence for the first decade when they kicked off here, right? And then since then, they've undergone a couple leadership changes, and I don't think they've necessarily been as visible or as prominent in the community. And yet, they're this massive asset and resource. Back in 2015, I think the economic impact of Johnson & Wales was over $45 million in North Carolina, with over 500 jobs that they were contributing to, right? And that's a story that needs to be told in our community. And then there's so much more that has evolved with the institution since it first came into the marketplace 16 years ago. So yes, culinary arts and hospitality management are kind of the brand of the university, and that's the largest portion of the students. But there's also a College of Business that operates both undergraduate and master's level programs. There's a College of Arts and Sciences. There's programs in health and wellness. There's a brand new College of Food Innovation and Technology that's just been birthed out of our Rhode Island presence. So other people probably don't know that Johnson & Wales is actually a system of campuses. So there's a campus in Providence, Rhode Island. There's a campus in Denver, Colorado. There's one in Miami, Florida, and of course, Charlotte, North Carolina. And Charlotte is one of the largest, but we have access to some of those other innovations that come out of the other campuses as well. And, I think you're going to see what attracted me to the institution at this particular moment in time is I'm an educational innovator. I love to be figuring out where the workplace is going, where the industries are going, what kind of a workforce they need. I love building partnerships. It's my signature. It's, connecting the dots in what people think are really disparate pieces and pulling them together, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Why don't we think of that? And for me to have this opportunity to lead the institution at this time with excellent faculty, excellent students, excellent staff, like the examples I gave you in the community give back section of this, that I get to amplify that on the stage in Charlotte. And that is a real privilege for me. And I think it will be a real benefit for the institution and for the community to see the other resources they get to tap into outside of just having a great meal in a great restaurant.
So is it fair for me to make a gut assumption here that piecing all those things together, plus having seen you at some extent and kind of knowing the kind of force you are in the community, the kind of things you're good at, and you just listed out 3 buckets there that I think make a lot of sense, is that Johnson & Wales has clearly had an impact on the city, but there's been probably a little heavier emphasis on enhancements and innovation in the programming and the curriculum and the things that are provided, which obviously can still continue to grow and still is, and that's one of your passions. But has there just been a lack of the story being told? And I don't mean to simplify it to the point of minimizing it and saying, well, just telling the story so people know, because storytelling is crucial for awareness, but it's also crucial for that third part that you said your passion is, which is collaborating, building the partnerships that then expand all of that. Like, I literally wouldn't have known there was a school of business that had technology elements in it had I not been told that by somebody in the last year. And I'm in the fintech world deeply and tech world deeply. Like, shouldn't I have understood? Like, you see where I'm going there? Have I diagnosed it correctly in your mind, or is it something else? And is that what you're going to bring to the table in your mind?
Yeah, I think you have diagnosed it correctly. Different people in educational positions think about who their consumers are differently. And I think most traditional institutions think my audience is a prospective 17-year-old junior in high school who I'm trying to tell, here's why you should come to this institution. We're going to give you a great foundation for a career. I think that our consumers are certainly those students. I also think that the audience and the constituents we serve are the business community and the employers who seek our graduates, right? And so I look at my role as not just telling the story, but listening to what the employer's needs are, and then reverse engineering what they want those graduates to have in terms of skills and competencies coming out, and then figuring out a way to maximize all of the resources that I have inside the university to make that happen. And I think that's probably a little different perspective than a lot of traditional academic leaders, right? It depends how you came into the industry and what you see as your role. I see my role as one is internal, making sure we have excellent quality academic programs, making sure that we have support services for students so that students will persist and stay enrolled and feel a sense of belonging and a family that they can call their own, where they can explore. And then I also see an equal obligation on the workforce side to make sure that we're staying in tune with what employers and industry are leading us to, so that we're ahead of the curve instead of always playing catch up.
All right, lightning round question. Are you ready
Okay.
for this? All right. There are two things that are so hot in Charlotte, they're on fire. They're literally on fire. Fintech and esports, right? I happen to just be a super nerd for both of them. You've got the School of Business. Technology is involved in that. I guess my question is this. In your desire and your approach to innovate in the curriculum, I heard you say the food science, the future thing there, the brewery stuff. Are you prepared and willing and interested in embracing some of those things? And I almost have a specific example in my mind, because someone saw that I posted you were the guest yesterday, and they reached out to me from the esports world, and they said, we're talking to some people over in staff in their IT group, or I don't remember what it was. And they said that they have work underway to develop some incorporated curriculum and clubs and things around esports at Johnson & Wales. So I guess my question to you is, like, is that something, one, that you could see yourself embracing from that innovation, but not just embracing because, hey, it's another thing we do, but you can connect it to that core that makes Johnson & Wales unique, because it's the cross collaboration of esports going into STEM education with your business school, or esports being put in live events with concerts and food, and it's an experience. Does any of that resonate? And how would you react to that if the staff brought you that thing and said, hey, let's do that?
I love it. I absolutely love it, Tark. And I think, because if the pandemic has taught us one thing, it's that the experience transcends both physical and virtual worlds, right? We've all been reliant, depending on our careers, in having access to individuals one-on-one on a sidewalk or at a cafe, or, having a glass of wine somewhere. And now, for the first time in history that any of us, truly the first time in history, the playing field has been leveled. And now everybody's on a Zoom call and everybody's participating with technology. And so whether or not you wanted to embrace technology, or you didn't, you are now forced to. And I think institutions of higher education, we have to lean into this. The ones who will survive this pandemic will be not only thinking about their own technology infrastructure and how they're creating accessibility for online education for their students, but what are the new careers and the new industries that are being spawned as a result of this? I think for me, one of the really exciting things, it sounds funny, an exciting thing about a pandemic, right? Who says that? But for me, the exciting thing about a pandemic is that you have to become creative. You have to innovate, and you can't just accept things as they are. You have to be willing to think differently. And esports was one of those things that came in, a number of years ago, where I think parents like me, I have a 14-year-old boy. I'm like, are you going to get off Fortnite? Are you going to get off Call of Duty?
Not just even playing, but are you going to stop watching other people play on YouTube and Twitch?
Exactly. And they're sending me TikToks all the time about somebody who's, won bazillions of dollars in the latest esports games. But I know that that's the future. I know that my 14-year-old will contribute in a new way to the economy that I haven't even thought about. So absolutely, I've got to be embracing esports for our students, not just in a social aspect, but from a career standpoint as well, right? What are all the things that technology is going to bring to the College of Culinary Arts and Hospitality Management and Business and Arts and Science that we can infuse together to make our graduates more well-rounded when they're getting out there?
My last serious question was going to be the future and what you viewed from the education perspective, but literally you just hit that, I think, perfectly. I just leave a plug with you to think about. Embrace things like that. I love your answer there. Embrace fintech too, because as you think about that, again, in that future of culinary arts, of arts and science, of all the things that are inside your world, like, I think we've learned that it's not going to be exactly like it's been the last 2 months, but there are going to be things that need to be done remote, done virtual, done digitally, and they're going to have to meet kids where they are or allow people to pay for things from where they are. So I would just encourage you to keep doing exactly what you've teed up that your plan is, and look for us in the community who are out in these little pockets to partner and do things like that. And with that, President-elect, I have a surprise for you. Now, I told you right before this started that I was going to say I have a surprise for you, but I said, just trust me. I said, what, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you trust me? And you said, well, I was going to say 9 before you asked this question. So let's keep it at a 9 or a 10. Trust me here. I've got a wonderful surprise in the form of a game that we're going to play. And what better way to play this game than to bring one of the greatest, most famous alumni from Johnson & Wales University, Charlotte history. Ladies and gentlemen, my colleague on the city council, the single most famous JWU Charlotte alumni ever invented and catapulted into this world, Larkin Eggleston. Larkin, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, sir. What do you think of my chef whites? You've never seen these.
I have not seen those. Those are fantastic.
I can only assume they've been in a dusty drawer for about a decade.
Yes, far longer than a decade. And thankfully, they were a little bigger than necessary back in 2006. So they still fit. Hello, President-elect.
Where's your knives at, Larkin?
They're in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah, keep those over there for a while.
Larkin, before we get into the game that you've designed and I don't even know about, do you have any reactions to what you heard from the president-elect? You immediately hit me last night when you saw she was my guest and you said, are you going to maybe tell me if you're bringing my president-elect of my alma mater?
Well, if I had a separate show from the one you and I host, R&D and the QC, and I was bringing on the president of Radford University, which I have been told is a real college apparently, I would certainly give you a heads up. So one of my 2 alma maters, you're bringing in the new president, who I already know and love, and I was offended I wasn't invited. So
here you are.
No, I am glad that I listened in on the first part of the interview, though, because we're going to play a little game to see how well Tarek knows Johnson & Wales, and you answered half the questions that I had prepared, President Richards, so I've had to change them on the fly.
Hold on, before you go into it, just Larkin, I am interested. Give me a quick reaction. the reason I know anything more about Johnson and Wales than it's a place and we have great food around town is because you have been brutally aggressive over the last 3 years, making me understand it. So you're diehard.
I think I'd have a seat on their board by now with that sort of advocacy.
All right, wait, let's take that offline. You heard President-elect here talk about her mantra and mindset going in, and you've lived it inside their walls from the community. I mean, just give us a gut reaction before we go into your show.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be as critical as it's going to be for every institution of higher learning to adapt in whatever the new normal becomes. For Johnson Wales, it's not only adapting to how do you now change the way that you teach, but also what are you teaching? Because we're talking about an industry in food, and President Richards mentioned there's tons of other programs at Johnson Wales besides culinary and hospitality, but that is obviously one of the cornerstones. And that industry is going to have to change in a way that's probably as significant as any industry in the country or on the planet in terms of how they deliver service and how they create customer confidence. And so I think, you've got to have somebody like President Richards that's dynamic, that's thinking outside the box, and that's going to figure out not only how do we deliver these lessons, but what lessons are we delivering and how we teach people to be successful in the hospitality industry. So I think it's going to be a huge challenge, but I think it's an exciting time for someone to come in and be able to kind of put their fingerprint on the university.
Bingo. All right, Larkin. All
right, so President Richards, you don't have to help Tarek at all.
Okay.
And I just encourage you not to. But if you start to feel sorry for him, you can help him if you know some of these
Honestly,
answers.
let's be honest with her. We have that trust. The honest answer is we planned this last night real late. I was in the hot tub. He called me. We were chatting. And then what happened was this. We said,
what a weird way to start that story.
You're right. We said, well, listen, we're going to surprise her, but let's not get a bunch of trivia and ask her as she hasn't even started yet. So he's going to ask me, and you can chime in as you need, as you see fit.
Although I will say, based on y'all's earlier interview, she is pretty up to speed on the Johnson and Wales way. I was going to see if Tarek knew what the mascot was. You kind of blew that question up.
Go Tigers.
Well, sort of.
Go Wildcat Tigers.
Yeah. All right, so Tarek, what is the shorthand way that students and alumni reference Johnson and Wales University?
Old Culinary Faithful. OCF.
No, but I saw President Richards raise her hand.
JWU.
JWU.
JWU?
JWU.
Is that followed by
It can be.
Okay, got it.
That's more JCSU, but JWU.
JWU, that's good.
All right, so President Richards referenced, I was going to ask you if you knew how many campuses where they were. She referenced that Charlotte took some of the faculty and some from Charleston. They actually did that from 2 campuses. And the other campus that is no longer around, can you tell me where it is? And this is something you should know.
If I should know it, then I would say it is in Virginia somewhere. It was in Virginia somewhere. And in fact, I believe that location was the Chesapeake Bay area.
I'm going to need a specific city or town.
Norfolk.
Well done, sir.
Yay.
Really? Are you serious?
Yeah.
That was planted. You probably said that to me when I wasn't listening to you and it stuck. All right, good.
Norfolk and Charleston both closed down, and then Charlotte.
1-1.
All right. We've got 5 questions here. I don't think you could possibly get 3. I'll say that.
I've got 1.
I know you know this person. You have met them, I think with me. Who was the first president of the Charlotte campus of Johnson and Wales University? One of my heroes and mentors in Charlotte.
Pat McCrory?
Thankfully, no.
No.
First name starts with an A. Last name starts with a G.
Alexander.
Art Gallagher.
Art Gallagher.
You've met Art.
Art Gallagher.
Look, we're connecting dots here.
And also one of the reasons that I started wearing bow ties, because he was a bow tie guy.
Oh, thanks, Art.
Question number 4. I'm going to name 3 celebrity chefs that I'm confident you've heard of, and you're going to tell me which one of them attended Johnson and Wales University.
I got this.
Not the Charlotte campus, but Emeril Lagasse, Guy Fieri, or Gordon Ramsay. One of them attended Johnson and Wales University. Which one was it?
Guy Fieri.
Final answer?
Yes.
It was Emerald.
Well,
All right, last question, and you should know this.
Okay.
What year did the Charlotte Lady Wildcats basketball team win the UCSAA Division II National Championship?
2019.
2018. You were there, Tarek.
I couldn't, dude, we've been in lockdown for like 2 months. I don't know. I remember.
it feels like 2030 right now.
Because I leaned over to him and I was like, hey, man, the food school plays sports too? And you were like, oh, come on,
I did a
man.
proclamation for the Lady Wildcats after they won their national championship. So
It
Tarek,
was amazing.
11
like at
varsity
Radford-
sports and on our Charlotte campus.
Tarek, just like at Radford, you got a 20 on that test.
Yeah, it's a 1.0 GPA. Solid,
That's not how math works.
solid work. Well, that's JWU right there for you.
Oh.
Is that right?
We are glad to have you as the new president of the Charlotte campus. Look forward to continuing to stay engaged. It's a great school, and I know you're going to make it that much better. And Tarek, thanks for letting me crash your show.
Larkin,
Thanks, Larkin. That was awesome.
I appreciate, this was great. It was a great idea. Larkin, this could have gone incredibly badly. She looked at me very strangely when I told her there's a surprise, but she trusted our trust levels back up to a 9.
Back to a 9.
It might be at a 10 now.
I was going to give him a 10. That was a great surprise. Perfect way to end the show.
Exactly. And Larkin, I've never brought on a co-host in these Friday amazing shows live streamed through the Business Journal. Can you believe they even allow me to do this? Perhaps you could take us out on episode 50 here.
Thanks for joining us for episode 50. And thank you to President Richards for coming on. Go Wildcats.